of 152 points to 10-1 by the 17th of December 2011. It says here, this is still a valid projection target. All right, so so there is that projection, all done for you by Sentient Trader. As you can see, there are several other projections. There's also a 19.6-week FLD projection, which projects a price fall down to 12.50, and that target was reached and exceeded on the 2nd of August. And so you can see all your FLD projections in there. You'll also notice that you see things called refined FLD projections. What are refined FLD projections? Well, refined FLD projections are projections that are based upon what is called the triad. As a matter of interest, if you want to keep this panel open on your window, you simply pin it by clicking that little pin over there, and then it'll stay on top of everything you do. Let's have a look at the triad. Here we go. The triad are 3 moving average lines, and they are based upon Hurst's famous half-span moving average, which he wrote about a lot in the Profit Magic of Stock Transaction Timing book, but which he didn't write about at all in the Hurst Cycles course. The reason for that is because the FLD is in fact very similar to the half-span moving average, except that it is projected forward and the half-span moving average is plotted backwards. But they use very similar concepts. And the full Hurst cyclic theory, which he presented in Hurst Cycles course, didn't make any use of half-span moving averages. It uses FLDs instead, I think, or I believe. But whether it uses them instead or not, I don't know. Certainly, he dropped the whole concept of using half-span moving averages. What happens is that we get a lot of people contacting us having read the Profit Magic of Stock Transaction Timing book, and I challenge you to say that quickly, many times in a row. We get emails from many people who have read the book and have been very inspired by the half-span moving average process, because it was demonstrated in the book to generate very accurate projections. And we get a lot of people saying, why isn't there a half-span moving average in Sentient Trader? Well, in fact, there is, but we went one step further and we generated not only a half-span moving average, but a 2/3 span moving average, a half-span moving average, and a 1/3 span moving average. The principle is the same. And when these averages intersect with each other, they generate a projection. So you'll see here, I think I'm displaying the wrong moving average. Right. Well, actually, that other one was a lot easier to look at, so let's just look at that one. You can see here that where the intersections of the 3 triad lines, the 3 lines, they're called triad lines, of course, because there are 3 of them, and where the intersections cluster together, refined projections or projections using the triad are generated. I call them refined FLD projections because, in effect, they are very similar to FLDs. They're very similar to FLD projections. They project a target and a time. But they don't actually use the FLD. They use what I consider to be a refined FLD, which is the triad, the 3 moving lines. And so where those 3 intersections cluster together, you tend to get a projection. If I switch on this whiteboard again, I can show you very simply. Here you have an intersection of 2 lines and another one. You have a cluster of these 3 lines. These 3 lines therefore form a refined projection here, and so you would go from the previous peak, and you would project down, and you would generate a projection in very much the same way that the FLD does. By looking at these 2 lines, you can see that the FLD generated the projection at this point, whereas the refined FLD projection was a little bit better. It was at that point a little bit earlier there. I shouldn't say better because it's projecting. It isn't projecting as far down, but it generates a slightly different projection. Sentient Trader combines these projections in its work and does all of that. Okay, so that is how FLDs are used. And if we have a look at the summary panel of our analysis summary, I would like to point out that in the consideration of the three major cycles, the dominant, the subdominant, and the predominant cycle, you will see Sentient Trader says here in the commentary, phasing analysis has revealed that the 17.6-month cycle is the dominant cycle. It's assumed to be the 18-month nominal wave, and the cycle is fast. The underlying trend of the cycle is currently flat. Recent fulfilled projections, those are FLD and refined projections and others, confirm the trend is flat but indicate that it might be turning down. The future FLD indicates that this cycle will influence prices to peak soon and then fall. What does that mean? The future FLD is the movement of the price, the FLD in the future, and here is that FLD in the future, and that is the third piece of information that I presented to you. I see a question. I'm going to take a look at it now. Here is the future FLD is going to cause prices to peak soon and then fall by looking at the track of the FLD as it moves through time, and that is where the third piece of information is available. Let me have a look at, I see Alain has a comment. Jim Tillman calls such crossings focal points. He relies two focal points. He raised two focal points together. Then he draws parallel lines from the next trough and the next peak. It's like Andrew's pitchfork. Yes, I'm not very familiar with Jim Tillman's work, but I'm very familiar with Andrew's pitchfork, and the process is really all the same. It's a simple sort of mathematical way in which prices are interacting with the cycles that are happening underneath them. Does ST use the refined for the pattern projection boxes, Craig? Yes, it does, and I'm going to get in a moment to talking about those pattern projection boxes, because the next thing I need to mention about FLDs, I hope that I've demonstrated to you basically how FLDs work. The big issue, of course, is that there isn't just one FLD, there are many of them. Okay, and if we have a look at all of these FLDs, you can see that price has broken through all of these FLDs recently and has come down and has recently crossed the 18-month FLD. If I zoom out a whole lot and plot a 54-month FLD, then I think you can see something quite interesting playing out over here. If we look at the monthly chart, you can see that all of these FLDs have been broken to the downside, indicating that peaks in all those cycles are confirmed. The FLD that remains to be broken is this 54-month FLD. Here's the 54-month FLD. Now, if price continues, well, it could go flat for a while and then drop down. It could do one of many things, or it could simply plunge straight down. But when price crosses this 54-month FLD, that will be confirmation, of course, that we have a peak of the 54-month cycle in place, and price is heading down to the next 54-month trough, and we will be able to generate a projection down to that trough. Now, there are many subtleties to FLDs, which I'm not going to explain today, but we're going to come back to FLDs many times, I'm sure, during the course of our trader chats, and each time I will try to introduce a new subtlety. Let me mention basically there are many subtleties, including the fact that sometimes FLDs, I discovered, often provide resistance, and price rides up an FLD, as it seemed to do here on the 20-week FLD for a while. Price here for a period of a month or two. Let me hide them. For a period of a month or two. This FLD line provided some resistance for the price movement. So sometimes price rides up an FLD line instead of crossing it nice and cleanly. So there are many subtleties. Sometimes price crosses back and forth across an FLD. price movement isn't as perfect as the idealized sine curve. So sometimes finding the price crossing of an FLD is quite tricky. In fact, you can see here price crossed down. Let me turn off that triad. Price crossed down over here, over that FLD in a very nice clean FLD break, and then it rode up the FLD, and then it sort of crossed it, then crossed it again. Sometimes FLD crosses are very messy. So I've got quite a lot to say about that, but we won't speak about those sort of subtleties today. What I would like to get on to talking about is the use of multiple FLDs. And let's see, the best. I'm planning to talk about this using a chart of gold. I looked at gold last night, and so let's have a look at a chart of gold. And this is a normal analysis, not get complicated. Here's a chart of gold. Okay, with several FLDs plotted. Now, what happens when you get several FLDs being plotted is that those lines form patterns amongst each other. Okay, you can see it. Well, obviously, whenever you draw any sort of multiple lines on a chart, you'll get patterns forming. And Hurst defined several types of pattern, but basically two. And the one is called a cascade pattern, which is when you get all the FLDs lining up and traveling in parallel. The fact that they're traveling in parallel is largely because they're all mimicking the same price movement, so it's no surprise that they're parallel. But they get lined up and close together and all parallel to one another. So over here, this area here, is a perfect demonstration of what's called a cascade pattern. A cascade like a waterfall. Okay, this is a waterfall going upwards, but you get the same thing when the price is moving down and when the price is moving up. Then you get times when prices don't seem to move nicely parallel to each other, but they move in a messy sort of a formation, and that's often easier to see in the shorter term. Let me just go to a daily chart and plot a few more VTLs. Let's find a messy period of congestion, what Hurst called a congestion pattern, and there's one over there. If you can see it over here, FLDs are overlapping each other a lot. They're not traveling nicely in parallel to one another. They're creating a very messy movement. The same thing is happening over here. Okay. So those are the things you look out for in terms of FLD patterns. What do they mean? Well, when an FLD pattern develops, a congestion pattern, where they're all very messy, tend to indicate that the price is likely to get stuck there. Price will also in future get congested in that area. It causes what Hurst called a pause zone, and you'll notice that Sentient Trader has in fact plotted a dark blue square underneath that, indicating that there is a pause zone in terms of price at that level over there, roughly the 1800 level. So when price moves down, we would expect price to pause there for a moment. When you have a cascade pattern, when everything is nicely lined up and parallel, and you have a cascade pattern, then that indicates that you can expect very fast and very quick price movement.